Leave it to the bird to talk about what people love most after the holidays: depression. Depression is an interesting subject to discuss due to it being an extreme taboo topic. Discussing depression in a YouTube video is the equivalent to opening Pandora's box with a 10-foot pole that's held together with tape and spit. To some it's emotional manipulation, to others it's pandering, to everyone else it's normal. While I might have the perception of an all-knowing God, I can't pinpoint when the discussion of depression became taboo, but it definitely did. Depression, while being legitimate, has definitely been a trap card that most people use to avoid accountability. The depression card has been passed around and abused by content creators more than a C+ hooker in Vegas. Guys, I know I abused my dog, waterboarded my cat, and molested a hive of bumblebees, but please don't scold me. I'm dealing with depression. Disclaimer, I don't actually do any of these hashtag save the bees. Depression could be a valid explanation for someone's motives, but at the end of the day, it doesn't excuse anybody from accountability. Now that we've settled that murdering your wife because you're depressed isn't a valid excuse, let's go back to the topic of depression in media. I'm not 70, old-fashioned, or a redneck, so if you're expecting me to go on a tangent about how depression is a fake adjustable mindset, then you might as well be my parents because I'm going to disappoint you. I also find it interesting that me even having a discussion about depression can be perceived by some as a tool for sympathy or attention. Just like breathing, eating, and drinking, they're all actions you inevitably have to confront. And depression is definitely one of those for some people. My point is that depression is universal and everybody deals with it in their own way, even you. You might try to mask your feelings of the day, but when the night crawls and you're alone in your dark room, I wouldn't be surprised if that's when you choose to acknowledge your feelings of doubt and self-worth. This isn't my fault, you technically gave me the shovel. General media tends to represent depression in TV in an interesting way. American media at some point had the belief of depression being able to be transferred like a cold or flu. If you look at most old American television, it's made to be optimistic and easy to consume. In my last video, I discussed escapism, and that's definitely prevalent with American television. TV is a distraction from the real world, and networks at some point fear that putting depressing themes or situations into shows too often will possibly remind the viewer of their issues and struggles too much, making them want to turn off the TV. I mentioned America television specifically because when you look at British television, it tends to be the opposite, usually making jokes out of people's despair. Watching the UK Office versus the American Office is night and day. The American version is more lighthearted and fun, making the environment look as somewhere you would want to work at, where the UK version is depicted as a miserable environment where everybody hates their jobs. For example, Michael Scott leaves the show to be with the love of his life, achieving happiness, where David Brent is fired with most of his employees hating him. And when you look at which one is more realistic, I'll let you decide. This isn't a UK versus US situation, put your fucking flags away, but the media difference is definitely prevalent. American media really fear depression, where British media embraced it and used it as a form of relatable humor. If you were to put on Peep Show, the UK Office, to an American adult, they would most likely have a slight form of culture shock due to most American television being focused on the underdog getting their goal, which is equivalent to the so-called American dream. While I understand how showing sad things to sad people looks bad on paper, I still don't believe that discussing depression will make people depressed. Depression being an equivalent to Voldemort is fucking ridiculous. And with the old dying and the irrational being educated, mental health is acknowledged way more today than it was 10 years ago. But even mental health awareness is still minimal. It's nice to acknowledge that it's real, but that's the equivalent to telling someone that they're breathing. Stating the obvious doesn't help or teach anybody to manage their emotions, and that's why media is so important. American sitcoms about happiness and British sitcoms about sadness don't handle the topic of depression in media to the extent that music does for me. My intention for this video at the end of the day was to state this simple point: depression is relatable. It might be a crazy concept, but admitting your issues to people who have those same issues is more impactful than pretending they don't exist at all. Most musicians have the luxury of expressing pain into art without the fear of judgment. How much good music in the world consists of sad undertones and humble beginnings? The Kid Leroy talking about how his teacher said he wouldn't be nothing doesn't scare me. Kid Cudi talking about how he once had nothing but kept dreaming doesn't scare me. Brockhampton talking about their thoughts of suicide and wanting more out of life doesn't scare me. They do the opposite, in fact. Talking about depression is the best way to understand depression. Relatability helps people not feel alone. I'm a human being who has dealt with hardship while also struggling with my daily irrational thoughts and fear-mongering. But knowing that my creative inspirations were once in the same place helps remind me that I'm not alone and that I too can be better. Depression is more than being sad. At some point in my life, I was cynical and mad at the world. I had no ways to cope with these emotions, so I decided to take it out on some people who were closest to me. And it made me ponder on some choices that I could have made, should have made, but at the end of the day, I'm not the same as I once was. Believe it or not, this exact same situation was discussed in a lyric by Brockhampton on a song called San Marcos.
The choice you could have made or should have made, they're not the same. I'm not the same.
You see what I mean now about relatability? There's been many times where I've been overwhelmed and pressured by outside factors, and the only way to escape was by slapping in my AirPods to hear the artists I like discuss about once being in the same position that I'm in now. I'm using music because it's an easy example for me, but the same could apply to movies, games, or any media that helps you cope with your struggles. I'm only making this video because I've reached a point where I feel comfortable to talk about my problems, and me stating my struggles shouldn't be perceived as me wanting attention because it isn't. Fears, dreams, and goals are factors in everyone's life, and I just want to remind you that if you fear over them, you're not alone. This video is technically a form of media, but instead of making some cheesy ass PSA regurgitating the same points you definitely heard before written by old people on a whiteboard, I'm talking like a normal human being. Discussing depression shouldn't be taboo, fearful, scary, or harmful because it's normal. I understand that media has an obligation to be a form of escape escapism, but it also has an obligation to address the real world issues. You aren't fucking crazy for jetting your life direction, you aren't a fucking nut job for not sleeping on some nights due to anxiety. Stop looking at media that contains happy people doing happy things as your main way to address your feelings. Use it as your escapism and find more relatable things to consume. Fuck you, Fresh Prince. I love you, Kid Cudi. With this being the wrap of this video, I appreciate if you care about what I had to say. Discussing a topic like this will be seen as opening a door to a dark hallway. While this is a plug, I genuinely mean this, but if you ever want to give a piece of your headspace, you should join my Discord server in the description. I enjoy new perspectives and open mindsets. Most people in Discord also tend to be content creators that you could ask questions or give advice to. This is for anyone who feels they can't discuss things on a creative level. Likes and shares appreciated as always, hoping to hit 1,000 subs by the end of January. Who knows at this point? See ya.
I chain smoke till I choke.